So my name, Justine O'Sullivan, Academic Course Advisor for Undergraduate Social Work Program at Liverpool. Today we're presenting a fabulous group of past students and who I'm so pleased that each of you could make the time to be here with us. And it's only come from that generosity of your spirit to share back your experience that we're going to benefit from. So firstly, I need to let you know that all these sessions are being recorded for the purpose of being able to be accessed by people who can't be here today. So if you have a friend or somebody else who wants to listen to this recording, please ask them to contact me. During this week, we ask you to put your video on, if at all possible, so that we can see your beautiful faces. But if that's not possible for any reason, how about thinking about loading up a professional photo of yourself so that you can be well represented in the sessions? And we'd also ask you to make sure that your you've got a name that we can call you if you ask a question. We're asking that anybody put, if you've got a question, we'd like you to put it into the chat, and we can ask everybody that. We can ask that question once people have finished their presentations. But the other thing we'd really love is, in order to give a certificate of attendance, if everybody could put their name and student ID into the chat, and then we can get a list of people who've managed to make attendance a priority today, and we can supply a certificate to say that. But the other benefit of doing that is that you will get an entry into the 2 lucky Zoom prizes of a $40 cash voucher. And the more sessions you attend, the more chances you get to be drawn in that. And we'll be drawing that on the final session, Friday at 3 p.m. So, the other detail, but I can see most people have done this, is to mute your microphone while presentations are happening, and I'll be doing that as well, just in case you're worried. So first cab off the rank, I'd love to introduce our, not so much first cab, but each of the presenters today. I'd like to be able to introduce you to now. We have Gabrielle Drake, Associate Professor Gabrielle Drake, who you may know from the Masters Qualifying Field Education Program, but we know her from all those years in the past, and really pleased to hear your story. But I'll also introduce, if I may, Jess Hamey, another graduate from the Social Work Program here at Western Sydney. Wave, Jess. And also Emily Stewart. Is Emily on? I'm missing Emily.
You can't get her audio working at the moment.
Oh, okay. So Emily Stewart, she'll get it working when she can, and she's going to make a presentation today, even if we manage to sign language or something like that. All right. So, any final questions before we start? Okay, what I've asked each of the presenters to talk about is their journey post-graduating as social workers, the highs and lows, the things that they think will benefit you in your journey. So over to Gabrielle, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. O. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners on the lands that I'm meeting on today, the lands of the Guringai people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to my Aboriginal colleagues who are joining us today. I shared with the group of presenters this morning something that my 13-year-old daughter said to me that I might share with you now. So as I was putting Grace to bed last night, she asked me, Mum, what have you got on for tomorrow? You know, teaching her good communication, social work skills. So she's asking me those sorts of questions. And I said, look, I was doing work, you know, I had the opportunity to be on this panel today and talking about a successful social work career. And so she said in jest, you know, that's going to be a short talk, ha ha. And then we got talking about, you know, well, what does a successful social work career look like, and what does success mean? So I did tell her that we'd talk a little bit more about it, that she had to go to sleep, but I'll let her know what I talked about today. A few things I wanted to start with today is thinking about all those years ago when I finished my degree at Western Sydney University. My dog's going to bark, of course. I finished my degree all those years ago at Western Sydney, and I was thinking about my first job opportunity. Okay, I might have to get the dog. She's going to be quiet, she might be. And so when I was doing my degree, we had 3 placements at that time. And throughout my degree, I did quite a bit of volunteer work. So I did some volunteer work at Lifeline, and I did some volunteer work at different kids camps. And I also did some volunteer work driving with my now husband, actually, and some friends, a food van around the city with St Vincent de Paul. And we drove the van around the city once a month and gave out food to people experiencing homelessness. And it was during this time that I became aware of an organisation called Vinnies for Youth, which some of you may now know is Youth Off the Streets, so YOTS. And I became aware of their crisis refuge in Marrickville. And it was during that sort of volunteer work that I decided that that's what I wanted to do once I finished uni. And so while I was a student, I applied for some jobs there and I got rejected every time. And then when I finished uni, I thought, no, I'm going to try again. And so I sent in my application and my letter, and I got an interview. And so I walked into the youth refuge, oh gosh, probably 25 years ago now. And I met Father Chris Riley, who some of you may know. So I went into the interview, and the first thing that Father Chris said to me was, well, I didn't want to give you an interview. I thought, okay, well, this is a good start. And he said, I didn't want to give you an interview because you didn't answer any of the questions properly. So you can imagine how I felt. I thought, oh, goodness me, this isn't going to go well. My dream job is not going to happen. And so basically, one of the things that I learnt, a very powerful lesson that I learnt through that process and that I wanted to share today, and I've talked to a number of the master's students who are about to finish their degree, is the importance of answering the selection criteria. So if you've got a question that says, high-level communication skills or effective communication skills, I think at that time I wrote, I have good communication skills. And I think, as Father Chris said to me at the time, well, that's lovely, but demonstrate it. So making sure in the selection criteria that you're responding to what they're asking and that you're very clear about it. The other thing I learnt, a very powerful lesson at that interview, was the importance of dress code. And the importance of checking in about what's appropriate dress for the interview and for when you're working there, because the young man that came in after me basically didn't get the interview at all. He was dressed in a 3-piece suit and he was told to just leave, that it wasn't appropriate for a refuge setting, and on his way. So there were a couple of important lessons that I learnt straight off. There's so many things that I learnt from that first couple of years of practice working in the youth refuge, and things that have stayed with me very powerfully and very much influence the social worker that I am today, and that the journey that I took. I learnt about the importance of supervision. In that context, this is going back 25 years ago now. I'm sure I hope things are different to then. But you know, the things that I was witnessing, the things that I was experiencing, the things that I was doing really required a very tailored and very deliberate approach to supervision. And so some of the things, you know, that just still stay with me today, you know, very much learned during those experiences, the importance of peer supervision, of regular supervision. And so I think, you know, a lot of the master students would have heard me talk about this already, but the importance of accessing that supervision. If you're working somewhere that where supervision gets cancelled or it gets postponed or it doesn't get prioritised, to be very deliberate in working out ways, whether it's through peer support, you know, we can talk some more about some of the different ways. One of the things that I'm going to facilitate from next year is a community of practice. So for new grads, for people who are finishing up this year, some opportunities to touch base with your colleagues and with academics for different types of supervision. So very much learnt the importance of that. Anyone that knows me and students that have heard me and worked with me will know that I talk a lot about self-care. I guess my idea of what self-care has very much developed over time. But working out for you what that looks like, and we'll probably hear from people today about what are some of the things that they put in place, but really important to make a very deliberate and very structured, you know, the things that work for you in terms of keeping you well in the work. Before I finish up, and, you know, we're going to bounce off each other as I understand it, Justine, that, you know, other alumni will speak and then we'll take questions. But I guess in response to my daughter's question about what does success mean, I've thought very deeply about what this means to me. And I think for me, success is where I feel like I'm able to make a difference. Success for me is where my skills, my knowledges, my understanding, where I feel like they can benefit and create change. I also think success relies on, one of the things I've learned over the last 25 years is the importance of good colleagues and a good network. So having people around you that support you in your work, that for me is what I would define as success. So having I guess a personal and professional alignment of what I want my change agenda to be in a place and space where I'm allowed to, invited to, supported to do that, and where I have colleagues in a network who are on the same page, fighting the good fight with and alongside me. Thanks, Justine.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Gabrielle. You've really, you know, brought to the essence some of the important reflections and ways forward. And it's really, you know, speaking to new graduates now or students still studying, to hear that those are the quintessential notions that have proved to be important to you is worth its weight in gold. So thanks very much. That's beautiful. Jess, how do you, can I hand it over to you to sort of take your journey, because you've gone a different pathway, haven't you? And I wonder, you know, emphasize the difference, but also what really resonates with you from what Gabrielle said. Thanks.
Sure. I also want to acknowledge the traditional owners of where I am, the Wongal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging as well. So I was thinking about this a lot this morning and this past week, because I've actually just finished up my role at DCJ, where I started 5.5 years ago. So I'm a bit of a critical reflector. So I've been doing a lot of reflecting. And this time 6 years ago, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had done 2 placements in totally different settings and I loved both of them. And I just didn't know where my career was going to take me. So I applied for everything. And as what happens when you apply for everything, you don't get everything. And so, you know, I had a lot of thank you for applying, but at the moment you're not the right fit, and try again later when you've got a bit more experience or stuff like that. And I did feel really discouraged, and I thought, you know, I really was ready to do this, and like, why isn't it happening yet? And, you know, in January the following year, I got a call about a job at DCJ, or then FACS. And I thought, wow, this was not something that I ever really saw as my future. I know at uni, there was a lot of people who were very much planning on going into child protection, and that wasn't me. But I thought, you know what, it's a good experience, and we'll see, maybe I'll do it for a year and then see what happens. And yeah, it's been a really interesting 5.5 on and off years. I learned very quickly that the best way to learn is to be around other people, to watch what other workers do. And I love learning from them and learning what styles really fit with me. I think the 6 to 12 months mark was the hardest part for me, learning that I guess by then I was considered a real caseworker and had a full caseload. And, you know, I was very overwhelmed at times and realized I had to really figure out how to make this sustainable. And like Gabrielle said, like self-care and supervision have been the things that I found are so important. And I feel like at uni, I used to laugh when everyone was like, self-care is so important. And I'm like, yeah, of course, but it is so important. And finding out what was going to work for me, and what's worked for me has also changed over time. I realized that I wasn't alone. I had managers, I had colleagues, I had senior caseworkers, casework specialists. I've done external supervision, and that's where I've realized that actually that's the best way to make this career sustainable. And that's what I want to do. I want to be a social worker for the rest of my life. So I have to actually prioritize it. So after working in FACS then for 2.5 years, I decided to go and work in London for 2 years in child protection, which was very difficult, different, exciting, lonely, and hard. And I couldn't wait to get back, I'm not going to lie, to the work. I loved the travel. I'm not going to lie, that was really awesome. But it made me realize that I had to advocate for myself as a social worker, that I had to, if I wasn't happy with something, I had to ask, you know, if I needed more support, or if I, you know, didn't agree with something, I had to actually speak up. And learning to use your voice, not just for your clients, but for yourself, I think is one of the biggest lessons I've learned, and something I'll hopefully carry on with me. I just thought I'd share a couple things that I wrote that I wish I had known when I was starting out, and things that I have to keep reminding myself of. Surround yourself with people who get it, e.g. social workers or people in other similar fields. Take time to find the little wins and record them. These will be the things that will carry you through. Set clear work-life boundaries. Work hard, but also make time for play and rest. I still have to remind myself of this one. Sometimes I feel like I'm at uni, I'm trying to get through to all the work until the end of the semester, but this isn't sustainable, and the work never ends when you're working with people. There's always more that can be done. Take time to reflect on your work, the things that have impacted you and why. It's important to notice our triggers and our biases. Find someone at work who's further along than you and trust them for advice. We will never stop learning, and they'll teach you that. If you're struggling at work, don't ever believe you're the only one. Talk about it. Chances are other people are feeling the same way. So yeah, I guess that's me in a really, really quick little snippet.
That's so fantastic, Jess. Thanks. you know, they're gems as well. Like we're getting all these beautiful array of gems and glistening diamonds and really lovely, thoughtful, useful ideas. So thanks. You know, hard one too, by the sounds of things. That journey through a different system altogether, you know, really sounds like it taught you so much. And I'm just, we've got a couple of other speakers, so we might move on. Now, Kate, are you on board with us at the moment? Kate Swager?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Hey.
Sorry, Alison for a while. Don't know why.
Welcome, Alison, Kate, whatever your name is. That's so good that you're on board. Do you want to start and tell us something about your journey, your life journey?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Thanks.
Thanks.
So I graduated in 2018 and finished uni. Didn't really want to start working yet, so I went traveling for a little while first. And then kind of when I got home, I started applying for jobs, and I applied for many, many, many jobs. And kind of every time you get that email that kind of says, you know, we regret to advise you that your application has not been successful, you know, you felt a little frustrated or just a little bit like, okay, maybe not my time yet. And then in February, I applied for a role that I didn't know if I was going to get, but I thought I would try anyway, as a sexual assault counsellor with the Southwestern Sydney Sexual Assault Service. And I finally got an interview after however many job applications. The interview itself was unlike any position I'd ever interviewed for before. So there was a panel of 3 people. There was numerous questions. There was a case study with its own questions, and the whole process went for over an hour. And so it was the longest process that I'd been through. And the people who interviewed me, they were fantastic. They spoke so passionately about the work that they did. And I left the interview thinking this would be an amazing place to work. But I also left the interview feeling like I had completely blown it and this wasn't going to work. So the Sexual Assault Service is part of New South Wales Health, and people had always told me that with health, everything takes a little bit longer, and it is completely true. So I didn't hear anything for over 2 months from that job, and I was about to, you know, send them an email, just ask for feedback. What could I have done differently? And a couple of days later, I got the call and they told me that I got the job, which I was completely surprised about. So I started working in May 2019, and it has honestly been the most challenging, interesting, eye-opening experience that I've had. And I do actually work with the most passionate and supportive people. So we work with a variety of clients. Referrals come from in a variety of ways, and the work is really varied. So all clients having their own stories, their own ways to kind of tell that story. And yeah, the work is, I think, really, really special, but it's also really challenging. And that's where, you know, like the others were saying, self-care, clinical supervision, and the supportive team that you have around you really, really come in handy. So utilising all of that team and that knowledge, there's probably over 200 years worth of experience on my team. And so asking questions at every chance you get, you know, soaking in all of what everyone else has to offer is, I think, very, very important. But yeah, there's a few things that I wish that before applying, that I wish I would have known. So like, be patient, because things can take time. Be persistent, and also be brave. So even if you feel like you may not be right for a role, or, you know, you don't have enough experience, just apply for it anyway. The degree of social work, you know, there are lots of different directions that it can take, and you won't know those kind of directions unless you apply for the role, basically. And as much as you guys probably don't want to hear this after studying for the last 3 or 4 years, my other piece of advice is just to continue learning and reading and expanding your knowledge and asking questions and keeping up to date on what is happening. So my degree in social work gave me an amazing foundation for the work that I do, but the work, like the study, the training that I did after I got the job has, you know, really helped me develop those skills and continue developing, basically. Yeah, so that's all. That's me.
That's a cheer from all the 51 participants who are all online. Yay. Thanks, Kate. That's awesome. And we've got a message from Blessing to say, thank you, panel. It's so beautiful to hear your stories and for sharing your experiences. Much appreciated. So I'm going to call on Emily. Do you believe you're ready to take on the mantle?
I think so. I mean,
Yay!
it's hard to follow Kate after that because that was really great. But yeah, I'm ready. Okay, so I work for the Disability Royal Commission. If you would ask,
You've frozen, I'm afraid. That'll be frustrating for Kate when she knows all her gems aren't being heard.
2019, and I went online and I applied, and it took me such a long time to even hear back. And then I got a call this year in August, and they asked, would I like to come in for an interview? And I said yes, and they said that the role would be for a policy officer. Mind you, I had no idea what a policy officer does or what I would be doing, but I still said yes, and I just researched online what a policy officer is. And it's still, I think because like we have just handed in our interim report, which sort of marks the halfway point of the Royal Commission. We're still not too sure what we're going to be doing next. So my role is still a little bit unclear, but I have mainly been doing submissions from the public. So that means like I code them, I read them, and these submissions could have happened recently, they could have happened in the 1960s, and it's really in any setting. It's wherever a person with a disability has experienced violence, abuse, neglect, or exploitation. So one of the main things that I do in my job is that I code these. So I sit there and I have a look like, who was the victim, and I mark that and I sort of put that in online, and then I sort of also say what was the nature of the violence or neglect or abuse or exploitation, who was it done by an organisation, by a family member, and we sort of go through that. And I work on the homes and livings team, so I basically look at anything that's happened in a home, whether that be a group home or in a private home, a residential institution, or if it happened when somebody was living in hospital. So that's sort of what we are doing mainly at the moment. And it can be quite difficult because you're reading such horrible experiences that people have had. And I myself am a person with a disability, and you do feel that sort of connect to that person. Even though you don't know what they look like, you're just reading their story. But there is a lot of support that is here for us, which is really fantastic. Everyone is so amazing here, and there's such a wide range of people on this team. I work with a social worker as well, but I also work with a lawyer and a lady who is also a television producer. So once we get through a bit more of the submissions, we'll also be looking at policies around NDIS, special disability accommodation, and we're sort of looking at we just had a hearing on group homes actually, and what we do is we provide all the information from the submissions as well as policies that we've read, and we provide that to the legal team, who also give it to the judge, and he decides what goes to a hearing. And it's really great because you have all these teams. You have, in like the policy domains, you have the health team, which looks at like, you know, things that have happened in hospital, or sort of like, things surrounding health. And you have education, relationships, economic participation, and First Nations. We have a First Nations team, which is they're just so, everyone's so wonderful here. And I highly recommend it if you're thinking of wanting to try something different in a social work field. I highly recommend applying for the Royal Commission whenever you graduate. And that's the thing, it's like Royal Commissions are always going on. At the moment, I'm pretty sure there's the Aged Care Royal Commission, which is still happening. And you get to be a part of something and you get to enact change. And you get to give these people a voice. And like I said before, I never really thought that this was social work, but it really is. And it's great, it's fantastic.
Thank you so much, Emily. That's so fantastic to hear. Yeah, you really brought out the passion. I mean, what was that? 1.5 years wait for feedback on a job application. Oh my
gosh.
Oh
my goodness, the actual wait time to get a security clearance was insane as well. You have to be so forthcoming in every aspect of your life. You have to give them all the information to your bank accounts, how much you make, how much you have, because you're dealing with such sensitive information, and we have all this data on our laptops, and they need to ensure that you're going to treat it properly and
absolutely,
work well with it.
Yeah, that's absolutely, so obviously a thoughtful understanding of why that's necessary. So we've got one more presenter, which is our very own social work graduate. Sorry, I'm claiming you, Brian, as a social work graduate, but a social worker. Brian Stout, would you be able to come online? And thank you, Brian, for waiting. And I should say that this is the Dean of Social Sciences, but we also claim him as a social worker. So over to you, Brian. Tell us about.
Yeah, thanks, Justine. And you don't need to apologise for making me wait at all, because I've really enjoyed. I came in right at the very end of Gabrielle's presentations. I didn't get to hear Gabrielle speak, but I've really enjoyed the presentations after that. So thank you to Kate and Emily and to Jess. As Dean, I'd like to start by acknowledging that the School of Social Sciences are located in the country of the Duraag, Tarawa and Wiradjuri peoples, and acknowledge ancestors who've been traditional owners of the land for thousands of years. I'd like to pay respect to elders past and present and thank them for their support of our work on their lands and beyond. I'd also like to give a particular welcome to every Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are with us today. Very pleased to have this invitation. As Justine said, I am a social worker. I'm not a Western Sydney graduate, but I'm very proud to be a social worker. And even when I teach and work with social workers, I've always been a bit reluctant to talk too much about my own experiences, because they feel a long time ago and a long way away. But as I've been asked to do that today, I will say a little bit about that. And having listened to some of the rest of you, I am struck by actually the similarities between some of my experiences and some of your experiences. As some of the rest of you will have done, I went into my social work. I know some people go into social work courses without a clear sense of what type of work they'd like to do, but there's others who go in with a very clear sense, and I was one of those who went in with a very clear sense. I studied social work at Queen's University Belfast in Northern Ireland, and I only really wanted to work in criminal justice. That's where I had that was my interest. I had done some experience prior to qualifying in that regard, and I was particularly keen to work for the probation board, to work as a probation officer. At that time, probation officers in Northern Ireland were required to be social work qualified, and I'm pleased to say that's still the case. It's one of the few countries that's actually held that line, and I'm pleased that they have done. They only recruit every 2 or 3 years, and I did a placement with probation, and I was fortunate in that they were recruiting just at the point where I graduated, and I applied for one of those jobs, and that's where the good fortune ended, because I didn't get one straight away. I was put on a waiting list, so I then had to find some other work. And I'd come in, again, I think this is a similar experience. Some of my previous experience in social work had been in residential work. I worked in children's homes and homeless shelters and hostels. And I got some residential work again in a youth justice centre. And that was great experience. It wasn't something I was keen to do. Residential work, I think, is really good experience. I think, and this is a theme, I think, when I think back to the early stage of my career, that one of the things with residential work is you're given a lot of responsibility very early on. You can be, you know, sometimes on your own in the centre, or one of only 2 people, working with people who have, you know, complex needs in a way that's often quite unstructured, and it's your job to bring some structure to that. So although it wasn't work that I was seeking, it brought some great experiences for me. But then I was lucky a few months later where a vacancy came up in probation, and I was offered a post in an area. Now, there may be people here who know Northern Ireland, but I'm assuming most of you don't. But in an area called South Armagh. South Armagh is euphemistically known as bandit country in Northern Ireland, because it's an area where there has been, you know, at that time during the Troubles, there was significant conflict and significant military presence there. And it was an area that I did not know at all. It was a different part from where I came from. But it was a job that I wanted to do. I took that job, and I was there for 5 years. And a couple of things I would say about that is that when I think back in those experiences, and I don't necessarily think about what I wish I'd known, but I suppose some of the things I maybe wish I'd understood a bit better is, firstly, I was working in a rural area. And the opportunity, again, is like a residential home. Working in a rural area, you get thrown into experiences much more quickly than you would do sometimes in urban areas where there's perhaps more capacity, more funding, more specialization. I had parts of my job where I was just doing everything. So I had areas of the country, like towns like Keady or Banbridge, where anything that came in the criminal justice system. So I was sitting in court one day, and one morning I was running youth programs in the evening. I was visiting people in their homes in between time, on office duty the next day, dealing with 12 or 13-year-olds who were managed to get caught up in the criminal justice system through shoplifting. The next day, perhaps dealing with a lifer on release, or somebody who'd committed very serious sexual offences, writing reports for juvenile court one day, Crown Court the next. Amazing experiences to have. And I suppose I would say that when you're thinking about what you're doing, what options are there for you, just think about what you're learning. If you feel that you're learning something new, you're probably in the right job. And as long as you're continuing to learn something new and along the lines of what it is that you want to do, then that's probably right for you. At the time where you feel you're not learning, that might be the time to be thinking about something else, whether within the organization or moving on. The second point that I would make is just the importance of good line management. And I don't want to overstate that point, because it's something that's outside your control. But I had a couple of line managers in my first few years. My first line manager was terrible. He was a really nice man, but had no interest in managing anything or anybody. And we used to have very good chats about the things that he was only interested in outward bound. He was only interested in taking groups of people camping or taking them. And I did realize afterwards there was a bit of an organizational politics there, that they put him into this team because they wanted to shake the team up. But they shook it up in perhaps not quite the right way. But he was then replaced by an excellent manager, and somebody who was deeply committed to her staff, deeply committed to the people who she worked with. She came from the area, and the learning that I had from her, the supervision that I got, the time that she took with me was incredible. And I was fortunate to be able to go back a few years later and to thank her for that. But when I think about how my career developed, to have a line manager at that was excellent. The other thing I would just say, and this again is where I think there is a difference, a significant difference in my experience of what you're describing, is in relation to self-care. Is that at that time it was 40 miles, so 60, 80 kilometers away from where I was living. So I had a long commute, but also this was the time before computers and social media and email. And I was literally forbidden from bringing work home with me. The files we were reading handwritten files. We were having to write them in the office. There was no possibility of working from home. And although there was a downside to that, because there's a long commute every day, there's an upside to that as well, in that really clear division between your work and your home life. And I'm now very conscious in my job and some of the jobs that you need to do. If you want that division, you've got to put it in place yourself, because nobody else is going to do it for you. I'll do the rest of my career very quickly. I spent 5 years in Northern Ireland. I then had the opportunity, there's an organization called WSU, a development organization, who were who recruited for people working in probation for places throughout to work in development overseas, and I had the opportunity to work for 3 years in a rural area of South Africa. I worked in the Eastern Cape. I taught at a university there, developed probation materials. One of the partners who I was working with encouraged me to take a PhD on, and I started my PhD when I was there. And I then, at the time I finished there, a post came up where she worked in Leicester in the UK, and I moved there and started my academic career. And a couple of points I would say about that. Again, had an excellent line manager who was very, very supportive at that point. But some of you might be thinking about academic career. Some of you, I hope most of you have enjoyed your time with us and thinking about studying further on. I would say if that is something you're thinking about, absolutely, if you want to do a master's in MRes, a PhD, follow that path. But if you want to come back to it later, social work is a field that facilitates that. Social work is actually a field that encourages that, because if we're giving ongoing contracts to social work academics, they need to have some work experience and to be thinking about that. And I do think, compared to some other professions as well, social work is a profession that values academia, that values that partnerships, it's interested in research. And I would be saying that for some of you, I know you're thinking about first post, but if you're thinking 3-4 years down the line that maybe you'd like to do some research, you'd like to do some further study, I would strongly encourage you to think about that. And obviously we'd like you to approach us or anybody else as well. But again, that was for me a fortunate opportunity of somebody encouraging me and encouraging me to take that on and then bring that forward. And I'll not talk about that later stage in my career, because I know we're focusing on the earlier ones, but I suppose those are probably the main points that I would want to take, and that even though it's a long time ago and a long way away, I think there are some similar themes.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Brian. Really appreciate you sharing that, helping us have insight into your journey as well. I suppose in addition to the encouraging people to think about some years down the track, considering the potential that they might have to explore knowledge further and build relationships with the university through a research degree, we'd also really love it if you keep us in mind, because we want WSU graduates as field educators as well. We want our students to keep having the opportunity to learn from you while you're in your workplaces. And so just remember that that's top of our minds as well. We want to see you again, whatever journey you want to interest us in coming along with you on. That's lovely. Rabina, one thing, we're going to move to final questions, but can I ask people, there's probably about 10 people who haven't put their student ID into the chat, because we'd really like to include you in, the certificates for attendance, but also the raffle prize. So the Zoom, the potential that we have for also that enables us to check back with you about whether you've enjoyed these sessions and what we could do for next year that you might have a suggestion for. So Rabina, did you want to move on from here?
Yeah, sure. We have a couple questions. I'd like to thank you so much, the whole panel, for your insightful, experiences and stuff. And as someone who's graduating soon, it's kind of like nerve-wracking, but also helpful to listen to all these stories, and I'm really grateful. Okay. So one question we have is, why do recent graduates have such a hard time finding a job, and why are there so many applications? This is for the entire panel.
I might answer that if that's okay. I've now got a friend with me so that the dog will be quiet, so you could all say hello to Teddy. There are lots of applications because there are lots of social work graduates. So I guess that's my first answer. But I think that one of the things that I wanted to say as a very proud Western Sydney alumni, 25 years now, is that people do talk about what the difference is between a Western graduate and someone who studied elsewhere. And I have to say it respectfully, because we've got Justine and Brian with us who aren't Western graduates, but they're still good social workers anyway. People talk about that there is a difference, you know, and I hear this very regularly when I'm talking to field educators. And I think for me, the difference really is about lived experience and how we centre that and how we value that within our program. Can we do more? Yes, absolutely. But I think that, you know, what I hear from employers, and certainly my observations over the last 25 years, is that what stands out are graduates who have a deep passion, often have a lived experience, and I think that brings particular passion, particular commitment, and particular understanding. And I think that what I hear from employers is that there's a real deep care. So a real deep care from our graduates. It's not just a job, that it's something that's more than that for our graduates. So I think that there are lots of applications happening at the moment, and I think particularly for students who may be in their second or third year who are participating today, I think I'd also add the importance of, throughout your program, looking at what can you do and what can you commit to that makes you stand out from all those other applications. So it might be volunteer work, it might be you know, work that relevant paid work. So whatever it is that you can do to make your application stand out. As I said, be very careful about you know, being very clear about responding to the selection criteria, because if you don't do that, or you don't do it well enough, you're not going to get to interview. So reach out to peers, people in your life who can give you feedback on that. I was talking to one of our recent graduates during the week, and she shared with me that she's the first person in her family to come to university. She left school in year 8, and no one in her family or in her people that she has in her personal life have ever gone through a process of responding to selection criteria. And so she worked closely with the university, with some academic staff and with some staff from careers. And I'm very proud to say that she's recently got a job 2 months ago and is doing very fine work. So I guess reach out to the university in if you need assistance, if you're finding it difficult to find work. But I guess what we've heard today is that it does take time.
Yeah. Oh, that's great about the graduate. Okay, so another question we have here is directed to Jess. Okay, so they said, your story and experience really resonates with me. I've always heard that working with DCJ is so challenging. Can you share your challenging experience working with DCJ in Australia, especially in the rural areas?
Yeah, so look, DCJ is challenging, but I think social work is challenging in general, working with people. There's a lot of, I feel like, sorry, I'm just trying to think about how to best articulate this. I guess I'll share a story. So I was working, this past year, I've been working in out-of-home care. So I've been working with children at this point where they entered care and have long-term care orders. So previously I worked in frontline child protection, going out, assessing safety and risk, working with families, taking matters through court where I had to, stuff like that. So this role's been a little different. And I was working with a 16-year-old young person who'd been in care for about 3 years. But for the last year, they had been living on the streets. They didn't have any stability. They, you know, were using drugs, and they had some untreated mental health as well going on. And I met them, and the first thing they said to me was, I want nothing to do with you. You can go away. You've not done anything for me. You, as in the department, I just don't want to see you. And I said, I can understand that. And what I did though is I showed up every week. I contacted them multiple times a day. or multiple times a week, or sometimes multiple times a day. I saw them about twice a week. And slowly but surely, we built a relationship, and it was really hard. I was sworn at a lot and yelled at, but, you know, I was so proud of their resilience and their strength and their ability to, I guess, get their needs met how they needed to. And, you know, after working with them for 8 months, they accepted a placement in a semi-independent property. And from last I heard, they're doing really well. It's a long journey ahead. And I was only a small part of their life. But I guess I felt proud to be able to be a part of that. But it was a lot of effort and a lot of work. And, you know, I had, you know, 13 other young people or children on my caseload that I was also trying to work at the same time. So, you know, it's about going to managers and asking, well, what do I prioritize? I can't get this all done because the to-do list is never ending otherwise. And sharing that load, asking colleagues for advice. You know, I haven't ever worked rurally, and I imagine that would be even more complicated. Because working in Sydney, I guess one benefit is there's so many resources, there's so many services, and it's really, I think another important thing to do is to really, whatever area you end up working in, find out the resources, build connections. You need to know what other services are around, and we need to work really well in partnership. You know, I find working for DCJ, sometimes people are like, you know, are you a good caseworker or are you a bad caseworker? And I'm like, well, look, let's just work together, you know, because it's the only way we're going to get through. And I'm rambling now, and I don't even know if I answered your question.
You definitely did. No, it's yeah, we've heard about the challenges of working in DCJ, and it's such an intense workforce to just enter. And I don't think, like, you know, anything in life is going to prepare you for the intensity that is DCJ. and you know, it's really great that you've done 5.5 years, and that's like, it's amazing. And, you know, like, thank you. It's
I'll probably end up back there again in the future. So I'm starting a role next week. So I'm taking this week off to rest and recharge and switch off from the past, because it's hard. You know, I still think of things I could have done. And next week I'm starting a role working in adolescent mental health at Westmead Children's Hospital. And I'm very excited to be working in the West again.
Wow, that's amazing. Congrats on the new job. Okay, and a last question we have to the entire panel, I guess, is what do you think about the social work education fee increase, and how can we support students who have financially disadvantages, and will there be any activism against the government's decision for this increase?
That's a difficult one, isn't it, Brian? Are you going to take that one?
I mean, I know Linda's here, if she's still here. She has more expertise in this area than I do. But my understanding is that the fee increase for social work is going to be less than we'd initially anticipated, and the fees are going to be, there is an increase, and but it's not a significant one, and the social work, the ASW and others have essentially won their campaign to get social work treated differently. What I would say, I know this isn't the forum for Beyond Social Work, I am much more concerned about our social science colleagues, about some people who are studying the other programs that we, and that's not to say I'm not concerned about social work, but there's other things that we offer. So there's other things that we offer. For example, we're planning a new major in disability studies in social sciences. We're hoping to develop some courses in youth work, but we also have courses in criminology, anthropology, and humanitarian development and others, and they're facing fees that are probably double what the social work students are facing. So I think what we can do is promote the value of what it is that we do, both in social work and across the school as a whole, because as well as the fee increase, the other problematic element is this constant discourse that social science and humanities degrees don't lead to good jobs. I would say, I should have said this in my presentation, although it's a while since I've worked in social work practice, I would like to think I use my social work skills every day, and they are they are really important skills in terms of, and I've been on management courses that I've thought I learned this in year one social work, and why they're teaching it to me now. And I think social work is a really valuable qualification. That social science is generally is really valuable, and the emphasis we have on social justice and within the school, I think, is something that we need to value and promote.
That's great. Thank you, Brian. That's great. Good summary. Thank you, everyone. The time has passed now to wrap the session. I wanted to really share with you the enthusiasm that's been coming through on the chat line to me directly, which is saying thank you to each of the presenters. Jess, I'm rattling through whoever I can see on the screen. So Jess, Amy, good luck for next week and your next step in your wonderful career, and keep true to that essence that you've really shared with us today. We really appreciate it. It's been great. Brian, thank you very much for your making time, carving the time out for us today. And I think it's really been a lovely contribution that you've been able to make. Rabina, I'm going to say thank you to you as a co-presenter for being so present and willing and able and up there with us both. And Gabrielle, thank you very much for bringing your thoughtful, tuned in, activist approach to making a difference for social work careers. Emily, Stuart, and Kate, best of luck with your journeys, and we thank you for making the time. And for each and every single one of the 51 people who've managed to come on today, we really want to thank you for your contributions, your listening, what journey, what will that value add to your journey, but also then what will you be able to share back with future graduates as well. So, and just to remind you that we thank you for your time, and tomorrow at 11 o'clock, there will be a presentation by DCJ. So book in. Stuart Malka is very conscious that it's often a huge question mark about what makes a great worker for DCJ, and there's no one thing. I think he came through, but he's very keen to talk to people tomorrow. So if you're able to book him for that session, that would be fantastic. We've got a social work educators session at 12 o'clock where people will, 3 of our academic colleagues are going to say about how to take that academic research step that Brian referred to in his talk. So if you're able to come back online, that would be great. And thank you very much to everybody. See you later.